am so happy to have Cathy here. Cathy, her name is Cathy Jean-Francois.
Swa.
Woo! Y'all know how I do with names, so don't even laugh. I practiced right before I came on, and I knew I was going to mess it up. But anyway, I'm going to be calling her Cathy.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
fine by me.
I am so excited to have her here. Listen, you all, when her and I met, I have, I guess, a personality because everybody I meet, we have just great conversation.
Yeah.
And her and I was just talking and she was just sharing. And one of the things that I like about Cathy is that she's experienced some of the things that I have. And so it is so good when you meet someone that has gone through something similar to what you've gone through, and they understand you and they can add to the conversation and you don't feel like it's just you. And that's exactly what happened with us. It was like, she was like, oh yeah, I know. And the same thing with her and me. It's like somebody else. Oh my God. And you felt, and I thought the same thought. So I'm so happy that she is here. I'm going to turn it over to her so she can share a little bit about herself because y'all know me, I'm a talker. So Cathy, please share just tell us about yourself.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Valeria, for even contacting me and so that I could be a part of your show. And I am so excited about this. So thank you. My name is Cathy Jean-Francois, or many people pronounce it Jean-Francois. And I live in Queens, New York. And I am a high school and middle school English teacher. I've been a teacher for about the past 15 years or so. Before that, I did work in book publishing, but my passion is writing. I'm a writer at heart. I have written a novel that I'm trying to get published now, and I have a blog about my experiences with depression, which we're going to talk about a little bit today. And so that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
So you all see how her and I connect, because I used to teach. I didn't teach the older ones. I had the babies, and I love her accent. She's from New York. I love New York accents, you guys.
And that's so funny because I don't even think that I have an accent. I don't hear
But no,
it.
it's just certain words. It's just like people from, they call us down south, which is, to me, Virginia is like right there in the middle. We don't really, I don't seem like I have an accent, but certain things that I say, people think, oh, there it is. So yeah, I think that's what's one of the things, but I'm so excited to have her here today. So listen, I know you listen to the podcast and there were several stories you like, but tell my listening audience what story resonated with you and what story you want to talk about today.
The one that resonated best or most with me was Therapy Works. Because, and not only that, you wrote it, the title is Therapy Works, ! And yes, we need that exclamation point because so many people look down on therapy. So many people look down on people who are, in therapy. And it's really quite important to open yourself up to something like that in order to experience relief for whatever it is that is plaguing you at the moment. So that really resonated with me. Your story resonated with me. I got to tell you, when I was listening to it, I listened to it a few times because I really liked, Valeria, the way that you described your experience, that first therapy session, how how you felt before you went in, how you felt as you were going in, when you were writing, filling out the form that they had you complete, and you're like, oh my gosh. And all of that was in true storyteller fashion, really, just like the name of your podcast, you're the storyteller. And I really felt what you were talking about, mainly because I have been there myself, not quite exactly the same way, but I really could understand your thought process, your emotions, your feelings, and why you were going through that. And it made complete sense. I love that.
Yeah. Listen, you guys, all my stories are true to heart. And I always write my stories out first because I decide how much I want to share. Because, some of y'all just nosing and I don't need y'all in all my business. I share enough of my business. Anyway, so I was, and it was hard for me to share that. It was because it was so personal. And I was like, okay, Lord, I'm going to go ahead and share it, because I kept putting it off and I was like, I'm going to just go ahead and put it out. and I pray that it helps someone, and I feel like it has. But let
Mm.
me give you a little bit of background on the story, just in case you listen to it and you forgot, or you haven't listened to it yet. So let me tell you a little bit about it. Basically, is there was a point in my life where I was going through a lot, and I mean a lot. And as you know, I lost my voice, at 6, and didn't start talking again till I was 23. So I already had baggage. And then becoming an adult, that's even more baggage. And because I wasn't a great communicator, I did not know how to, deal with my feelings and my emotions. So I was an introvert, and I am. It doesn't sound like it, but I am an introvert, and
Oh
I
my.
internalized everything. And
Mhm.
so it got to the point where I wanted to end it. I just didn't want to live that way anymore. And I knew something was wrong in my church. They start advertising about they were having um a therapist. You can come to therapists and counseling, and they kept advertising it at church, and I kept seeing it, and I
Mhm.
kept ignoring it. And
Mhm.
then they even stepped it up. They had people, they interviewed people, and at the beginning of the service they would show people talking about how they went to therapy and how it changed their life. And I blew it off a little bit more. But then one Sunday I saw somebody, and I was like, you know what, I want what she has.
Mhm.
I went on the website, I looked it up, and I found a therapist. Now, this is what was so funny about this therapist. And she was supposed to be my therapist.
Mhm.
I looked for someone that I knew I would not see at my service, because I went to 8 o'clock and she went to 10. I wouldn't see her because I would have been devastated,
Yeah.
because you would think, oh my gosh, she knows everything about me. She's judging me right now. She wasn't. And I made the appointment, and I sat in the parking lot, and I was debating, and all kinds of thoughts was going through my head. I took my crazy stuff in there. Secretary gave me this form. Y'all, I'm sitting at the table like, what does this form have to do? I knew I was going to have to deal with some daddy issues. But the form was like, what is she asking me this stuff for? I didn't even understand the form. I get in, y'all, and as soon as I sit down, I bust out crying, just bawling. I mean, any and everything that was inside of me, it came pouring out. And she was like, oh my God, baby, let's pray. She had music playing, and she started praying for me, and God knew it, she needed to do that. And she brought a calmness down to the point where she could help me. And that's exactly what she did. And I gave illustrations about some of the things that she taught me. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe I went through this long carrying all of this, when all I needed to do was make an appointment, sit down and talk to someone who's a professional, who knows how to help people, especially single people and people of color. Because I always thought that, growing up, you don't hear about, I'm going to therapy. Black people don't, I'm not saying all, but there are a lot of us out there that thought the way I did, therapy. Black people going to therapy, you don't need no therapy. You just need some Jesus. I
Yeah.
had Jesus and I needed some therapy.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
why he created them, to give us help
Yeah.
on this earth, walking around dealing with y'all.
Yeah.
So I
Absolutely.
know you shared your thoughts on therapy, and I know from us talking that you have something similar. So can you share with my audience your story dealing with therapy?
Sure. So I had been suffering with depression for so many years, and I just didn't know why. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand myself. I didn't think anyone could help me because I didn't even understand what I was going through. And I do have a twin sister who doesn't. She never understood how she could help me. She knew that I was suffering internally. I never shared this information with my parents. This is not something you talk about. I didn't want them to know that I was dealing with some
Yes.
emotional stuff that I didn't even know how to
Yes.
explain, right? And this is not something that you talk to your friends about. Uh, but my sister
Hmm.
knew that I was suffering, and I and it was suffering in the sense that I would just be depressed all day and not wanting to do anything. There were times when I would just be sitting there and I just start crying for no reason at all. And I didn't understand it. Finally, my sister was like, she's had enough. So she started actually searching for therapists in our area. And it was because of her that I first started seeing a therapist. And my experience isn't quite like yours, where, I was sitting, in the parking lot, or, really contemplating this. The first time that I went, I was like, I'm finally doing something for myself. I really felt good about it. And at that time, I didn't know that therapy was something that a lot of Black people
Yeah.
look down on. I didn't know that. So I couldn't go in with any preconceived notions. So I'm really grateful for that, because I think that that's what helped me keep an open mind
Yeah.
as to how therapy could help me. And I went for several years until I had quit my job and I didn't have insurance anymore and I couldn't go anymore. And then I started going years later when I realized that I was just becoming too emotional, where I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I've been going to therapy on and off for like the past 10, maybe 15 years even. And no, let me scratch that. About 20 years. Oh my gosh. But I mean, it's not a quick fix, right?
No, it's not.
You have to go there several times to really get, you have to first find the right therapist for you, somebody who, understands you and you really understand the way that they work. For a very long time, the therapist that I'm working with right now, I didn't, for a while, I didn't really like her that much. And I was like, she's Caucasian. And so I didn't know if we were gonna mesh well, but she challenges me. She challenges me to think about things that I didn't think about before, to admit things to myself that I would not otherwise admit. And so I like that aspect of her, what she does for me. She challenges me to try new things, to try different things, to have a different mindset, to think differently, she just challenges me. And I think that that's what's so important. I need that constant challenge and that person to hold me accountable to do the things that I need to overcome some of the things that I'm dealing with in my life.
I love my therapist. I did. And again, what is so amazing about me choosing her is that she is one of the best therapists that, around. She's Dr. Scott. And
Mhm.
I did not know the magnitude of who she was. And
Mhm.
God sent me the best because he
Mm.
knew what I needed.
Right.
And she was able to just pour into me. She gave me great tools to use. I
Mhm.
still use them to this day.
Mhm.
And I love the fact that she was a Christian, and I love that aspect of her being able to pray for me, because
Mhm.
at that moment, that's exactly what needed to be, because there was nothing that anybody could say to me while I'm in all those tears and crying and all that. There was nothing anyone could say to me, to calm me down. But as soon as she grabbed my hand and she said, let's pray, immediately it calmed me down. And I know
Wow.
people have different ways of whatever, but what I was going through, I needed prayer first. I
Mm.
needed prayer
Mhm.
first. And
Mhm.
then she was able to sow into me. And one of the things that was so shocking to me is that the form that I filled out, and then when she looked at the form, she looked at me after she finished praying. She said, "Oh, baby, you're carrying so much." And I'm looking at her like, "I'm single. What? I don't have a husband. I don't have any children." And she was like, "As single people, we have to carry everything.
Yeah.
We don't have anyone to share the bills, the children,
Mm.
making the decisions, getting the house fixed, all those things. You don't have that. It's all on you." That's a lot of bags to carry, because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's the way she talked to me about using. She used the analogy of bags, and she just, you know, I was surprised, but then I looked at, as a single person, she's absolutely right.
Mhm.
Absolutely right. And it took me some time. And like you said, it's not a one and done.
Yeah.
I went back a couple of times, and then I was starting to feel so much better.
Mhm.
So for you, were you married or were you single when you started going?
I was still single when I started going to therapy. Now I'm married. I've been married for about 3 years now. But at the time, see, what's interesting is that yes, I was single, but I like the bills and taking care of the house and all that stuff. I shared that with my sister.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
so she and I were like kind of a partnership, but like a working marriage. And but I was very much alone in thinking that because she didn't understand what I was going through with the depression that I was suffering with, I was very much alone. was very much alone in that aspect. But other than that, you know, I was able to share a lot of my life with my sister, and she was there for me. She supported me when I did start going to therapy, and even, you know, years after, when I no longer had a job and I was trying to do a whole lot of things without work. My sister was there for me. She stayed there with me, but still, I, s- I had a moment where I was feeling so overwhelmed with these emotions that I didn't know what to do with, that I was like, I need to go back to therapy. And at that time I had another job and I did have insurance. So I was able to do that. And I've been in therapy with the same therapist, I think I'm going to say easily over 5 years now with
Okay.
this one. And yeah, I don't know where my life would be right now if I did not seek therapy, because it literally is like getting the baggage that you mentioned,
Mhm,
right? It
mhm.
really is like unloading all that baggage. And even not just of the things that happened in my past, because of course that comes up too, but the things that are happening right now, you
Yes.
know, dealing with issues at work, dealing with when I wanted to have a baby, dealing with I have wrote some notes down here. My social anxiety, all this stuff is recurring in therapy every single week, and even dealing with stress of a marriage. You
Yeah.
know, there are things that I need to keep talking about and keep, you know, working through. And my sister doesn't want to hear all that all the time. You know, my friends are not going to want to hear all that all the time. They're going to be like, oh gosh, you know. So the therapist is what is why she's there. She's able to look at everything in an objective point of view. She understands me at this point, so she understands what's in my best
Mhm.
interest, and she'll guide me towards that, and she'll challenge me to do the things that I need to do.
Well,
It
I think
works.
I think it's awesome that you had your sister there,
Mm,
because when
thank
you're
you.
going through a whole lot of stuff, and you already feel alone, and then when you are alone, it makes it even more difficult because you don't know how to handle it, but you're telling yourself how to handle it. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? You're telling yourself, but having a sounding board is so important to
it
have.
is.
And even if you're a person who doesn't want to go to therapy, at least find someone, a best friend or someone that you can talk to, and you
Mhm.
can share some of that stuff, because sometimes you think crazy and you
Yeah.
need somebody to say, listen, now they're not therapists, so they're going to be real with you and say, listen, girl, you offers two left shoes. That don't even make sense. Don't you tell nobody else that. You need that kind of person, or
Yeah.
you need to go sit on the couch into a therapist that can be nice to you. Well,
Yeah.
let's try to think of it a different way.
Mhm,
Let's
mhm.
try this if you need that.
Yeah.
But you need to get that stuff out of you, and you need to share with people. And another thing with me, you said that you went back. I end up having to go back to therapy for
Mhm.
entirely something different. And
Mhm.
I want to share this with everyone, because I shared it in my story. I
Mhm.
was on a job, and that job was horrible. I mean, we
Oh.
were going through hell on that job. Every day it was a struggle. You could literally see people in a parking lot sitting in the car, like praying or just pulling themselves together to go in. It was so toxic.
Oh my gosh.
we had they had I think it was, you could go to free sessions like 5 times or something, and they had it for mental health. Listen, I signed up. I went, I sat right on that couch with that lady and I was telling her everything was
Mhm.
confidential, and we could just share and she could help us. But I was very particular what I shared to her, because although they said it was confidential, I mean, when you go in and you start blasting the job,
Mhm.
your place of employment, and she works for that same company,
Ah.
you got to be a little bit. And I was a little bit, like, let me not share that part of, but I'll share this
Mhm.
part of it. And I
Mhm.
went back to her. It got so bad that a lot of people start going to therapy,
Oh, wow.
a lot of
Wow.
people. And it got to the point where the people upstairs, they were like, something is going on, because we're getting all these, I guess, therapy bills coming in. They
Wow.
came in and did a cleansing. They came in
Wow.
and they let some people go, and they sent human resources in, and they sent all that stuff in. So I think if we had not have started going to therapy, that work environment would have still been the same.
Right.
But I share that part of the story to let you know that it's not just about personal stuff. Sometimes on your job, it
Mhm.
can be so stressful to the point where you need to go and sit and talk to a therapist just about that particular thing
Yeah.
and dealing with everything that's going on.
Mhm.
So it is important, not just for personal, but for professional and onward.
Right.
So yeah, so and if you ran into somebody who had a negative thought
Mhm.
about therapy, what would you tell them? How would you convince them to go, or what would you share with them?
Oh, that is a good question. I I guess I would tell them about how, the idea that we all, every single person in the world needs therapy because we all are dealing with things from either from our past or present
Hmm.
that are hurtful to us.
Hmm.
I would say, doesn't it feel good when you talk about something that's been bothering you? Well, think about having somebody to bounce ideas off of on a consistent basis,
That's a good
uh,
way of putting it.
right?
Yeah.
And somebody who is non-objective. I'm sorry, who is objective, who's not subjective, who's objective, and who will look at the information that you provide and will really give some good pieces of advice because they've been trained in doing this. So, just once or twice, don't close your mind to something like that. You don't know how it can help you. You try 2 or 3 sessions, and if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you, but at least you've tried it and you didn't knock it down.
Yeah. And I think sharing a personal story, because I'm a storyteller, so I believe that stories bring us together. And
Hmm.
sharing a personal story, because I know there have been two people who had a negative thought about therapy. They were shocked when I told them that I went and I went and I went. And they were like, "What, you?" I was like, "Yes," because I couldn't deal with it. And
Right.
it didn't hurt. And they had all these preconceived notions in their head about
Hmm.
therapy. I'm
Hmm.
like, no, it's nothing like that. Nobody's gonna beat you over the head and say, you're a bad child, or your dad's bad, or and all
Hmm.
that stuff. No, they help you to try to deal with your feelings and your
Hmm.
emotions. It's not
Yeah.
about your dad, it's not about your mom and their emotions,
Hmm.
or whoever it is.
Right. Right.
It's about you and how you perceive it. And they were like, okay, you know what, I think I'm gonna go. I know one, she actually did go, and I'm so glad,
Okay.
because she was close to me, meaning
Hmm.
that she was to the point where she was like talking, she had some language that I had, and
Hmm.
I as soon as she said it, I was like, oh my God, that's me. Let me,
Hmm.
and I shared my story with her. And I think that story helped her. So let's go ahead and answer these questions at the end. As you all know, that I do share my thoughts at the end of all my stories, and then I ask questions. So Cathy and I are going to answer these questions. And the first one is, what do you think about therapy? Are you for it or against it? Why and why not? You kind of already answered it, but you can just sum it up.
I'm definitely for therapy. I think it works. I think every single person in the world needs therapy in some fashion or the other because we all are dealing with pain that we carry with us through our lives. And sometimes, if we keep things inside of us, it may come out in disease, perhaps. I've done my preliminary research on therapy and how it works when I was writing my novel, which is about a woman who's suffering with depression. And I really wanted to understand, well, what is it about therapy that works? And you just have to let it out. It's just oh, you used the perfect word before, a cleansing. It's a
Cleansing.
cleansing of all the blackness, the ugliness that's inside of you. I think I'm for therapy. I think it works.
And I agree. To answer the question, I'm on board with therapy. And I know it's very hard for people, but first of all, if you go to therapy, you don't have to tell anybody. That's between
Yeah.
you, God,
Oh,
and the
definitely.
therapist. You don't
Hmm.
have to go and spring and tell it to the world. I'm not married, but I'm just saying, you don't even have to tell your husband, I'm going to the doctor. He don't need to know what kind of doctor it is, unless he want to listen, I'm just going for a checkup. and just go and get the help that you need,
Yeah.
especially women, because we carry so much. And my
much.
therapist was like, we are the kind of people that if we were to board a plane and they said to us, you know, you could only carry your carry-on bag, this is what my therapist said, we would be the ones that want to take everything because we scared something gonna get lost and we want to carry all this, when they have a whole area that can carry it for you and you don't have to lug it on. And then she was sharing, she was like, put some of that stuff in the overhead compartment. Anything that you cannot fix right now, you don't need to carry that. Our bodies as women were not made to carry all that stuff. That's why we have men. God made men for a whole bunch of reasons. Use them. Let them carry some of that load.
That's what I'm
saying. And she was like, put the bag, lock it. Only pull down the bags that you can deal with at that moment. And I shared with my cousin, I told her that a couple of weeks ago, and she was like, I never thought of it that way. And I said, and that is why I've never forgotten it. Because if you've flown on a plane, if you even ridden on a bus somewhere or a train, you don't carry all your stuff with you. You have to put it somewhere and take a bag with you. One, that means one thing at a time.
Yes.
Okay. And so
I love that.
The second one is, if you have gone through therapy, did it work for you? And of course,
yes, it worked for me and it continues to work for me. Again, just the challenge alone of trying to become a better person, learning through the issues that I'm dealing with. There were times when I just had, a good, conversation, a back and forth with the therapist. And there were other days where I just stayed crying for that entire session as I spilled my story. There are times to cry, there are times to listen, there are times to think about, there are times to go back, there are times to stay present in the moment. Therapy works. It worked for me.
And I'm answering that question too. And it worked for me. And one of the things I want to say, and I wasn't going to say this, but this apparently God wants me to share this part about my therapist. The very first therapist that I talked to, she talked about medication. And I know for Black people who was like, you ain't gonna give me no drugs, I'm not gonna be taking anything. Now, I didn't feel like I needed it, but in going back over and over again, going in my mind, I probably wish I had taken it, because it took me longer. But she was explaining to me, it's not something that you have to take forever. It's something that you can take short time. And when she told me that she took medication to help her mind to calm down so that she can process, and she said, yeah, I took it for about 6 months until everything that was going on in my life settled down. I needed it. So I think that is important. If you feel like you cannot do it on your own, if your brain, take it for a little bit, and then come off of it. And another thing she told me, and I did this, she said, you need to let someone know that you're in therapy, at least one person. And I did that. She said, you need someone, if you can't get in touch with me, as a release. Someone, even if they can't solve the problem, even if they can't fix you or anything, at least you can get it up and out of you.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. She's, you just need to talk. If I can't reach her on the phone, or in your case, you didn't have insurance, but having your sister, knowing that you went there, even if it was something that you just had to get off your chest, you had your sister. I told my best friend, I told her about it. I called her. I probably was crying, me and my crying self. And I told her, and she was like, great. She was like, great, and I was able to talk to her about it, and share with her if I couldn't get in and make an appointment. So exactly. I think it's great. Now, I do know you have a blog, and I really want you to share with my listeners about your blog. I know you have other things, and the book, but I want you to tell them a little bit about the blog.
Sure. My blog is called cathyscross.wordpress.com. Cathy's Cross is because, we all have our burdens to bear, and depression was my burden. Depression was my cross. And I started off with saying, I'm going to, I hold my cross up high, I'm no longer burdened by this, or I try not to be burdened by this. And what it is I try to make it a weekly or biweekly blog where I post things that have some of the issues of depression that I've dealt with in the positive. I take a positive spin to it.
Okay.
So it's Cathy's Cross, a depressive's positive perspective, right? The things that I've dealt with in the past and how I'm looking at it in a positive point of view, because I just want to remain positive in the midst of all the depression that I'm going through. And so I touch on my social anxiety, my mild agoraphobia. I touch on how, how writing has helped with my depression as well. There are a number of things that I tackle with my blog, and it's really a place where I hope that other people, depressives who go there will see something and will be able to resonate with it and be like, well, I'm not the only one, because me, literally, I thought I was the only one dealing with something like this. Out of all the millions, trillions of people in the world, I thought I was the only one dealing with this. So it's just a way to show people that, you can go through some depressive states. However, you can come out on top, and you can come out with a positive perspective. I think that we are all going through our issues for a reason.
Yes.
My reason is to share it with other people. My reason was to share it with you today, Valeria.
Yes,
Why not?
absolutely. And I love this about the blog, because if you are one of those people who are not quite ready for therapy, at least you have a resource. And I think that blog will be an excellent resource, because you can find yourself in one of those situations and you can listen to somebody who has been in the same situation you have, and this is what they did, and it turned out a positive. And I think anyone, if you're not ready, go to her blog and find yourself in it and get some help, because that is a resource of help, and you can use that as your therapy. If you don't want to go sit on the couch, use tools and use that as a therapy session, sitting in your house, just reading what somebody else went through. And tell us a little bit about your book, because I know you have a book.
Yes, it's not published yet, as I mentioned before. It's called The Box, and it's about a young woman in her early mid-20s who suffers with depression, and how she has dealt with it. Now, she is somebody a high empowered woman who works at a magazine, and she has a lot on her shoulders, right? But she's also dealing with trauma from her childhood, and now she has to deal with this trauma, and that's where her depression comes from, and then come to realize that all the members of her family are suffering through their own type of depression. So it's really a book about how one woman tackled what she suffers with, and just the realization that we are all going through our trials and tribulations that impact us in such a way that it could leave us in a depressed state for a moment at least.
Well, I'm excited. I cannot wait for it to come out, and you need to let me know so I can let my listeners know the book is out. Go and buy it. And I will make sure I have all your social media things in the description, and the blog information. I want to make sure that I do have that. But Cathy, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for agreeing to be on the show. Thank you for bringing it and helping us to deal, with depression, and you being a light, because if we looked at you, we wouldn't know. And the same thing, if you looked at me, you wouldn't know. But then again, some days you might, because we've all had days when we look like we've been through.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being here.
Valeria, I want to thank you for inviting me here. Thank you so much for allowing me to talk about myself in this forum. And I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your blog. Your podcast and all the things. I've listened to a few of them. I like your storytelling. I like the way that you do your blog. I keep saying blog, your podcast. I think it's really refreshing. And so I'd just like to say thank you for allowing me to speak about myself on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.